All right, Jim and Des, it's all yours.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. So welcome to the Town of Avon Advisory Plan Commission meeting. If you are interested in having a copy of the agenda or the staff reports, they are available online at the Town of Avon website. We will be conducting business as outlined on the agenda. From time to time, the board may deviate from the agenda. As president of this body, I will inform those in attendance of any deviations. This meeting is being recorded for the public record. Because of this, we request that personal conversations are kept to a minimum and all cell phones are set to vibrate with any phone calls taken with your microphone muted. If you are interested in commenting during the public section, please type your comments on the YouTube comments section. Your comments will have to be read to the commission by the Avon town staff. Please address your comments to the board and not to the staff or to the petitioner. Your comments should relate directly to the case at hand. Responses to public comments will be given once the hearing is closed. We do understand that there may be several persons who wish to speak. In order to keep the meeting running in a timely fashion, we would request that you not repeat previous comments. Thank you for your assistance in facilitating a respectful, fair, and timely meeting. So, Des, if we could have the roll call, please. Des or Jody, either one of you for roll call.
This is Jody. I don't have the sheet in front of me, so I just texted Des to unmute himself if that's the issue.
Yeah, he's muted, Jody.
Sorry. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Okay. Paul Guckenberger.
Here.
Lindy Albers.
Present.
Grant Niemeyer.
Here.
James Peters.
Who?
James Petrini.
Here.
Charles Bischoff.
Here.
Sam Duvall.
Here.
Catherine Ransberg. We have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll get started then with approval of the minutes from February. So if everybody has those, if you haven't had a chance, you can please review those with any changes or additions made to those minutes, please.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion. This is Charles Bischoff, that we approve the February 24th, 2019 meeting minutes.
Is there a second?
It's Grant.
And due to the fact that we're videoing this, if we could, let's do a everybody one at a time, please, for approval.
Sam Duval approve.
Paul Guckenberger approve.
Lindy Albers approve.
And Jim Petrini approves. So we'll consider those approved. Moving on to committee reports. Was there a BZA meeting?
BZA meeting, we had a special board meeting held on the 16th, and all we had was the development standard variance for Avon schools, and it was approved.
Thank you. Questions for BZA? Okay, RDC?
Excuse me, this is Jody. If I can butt in, we also had a regular BZA meeting to grant development standards variance for the Gibbs parking lots, not to have curbing.
Thank you, Jody. RDC?
This is Grant. Yes, we reviewed the County Road 100 South plan notes, and I'm sorry, Dan, what did you have any comments on that?
They also they did the final step for the Avon Landing approvals, the project agreement.
Any questions for RDC? Okay, town council? Anyone? Okay. Hearing none. At this point, request for continuance or agenda modifications.
Misty Eyes has continued to next month's.
Thank you. Okay, next we have docket MIPP 1901 Stevenson minor with a minor plat with a primary plat. Before we start, just because this is being video streamed, Dan, if you could please go into a little, give us a brief overview of what we need to look at in this case and what our options are.
Okay, this is a primary plat case. Primary plat cases are ministerial approvals. So your focus is very simply whether the plat complies with your zoning ordinance and all applicable zoning ordinances. You do not have any waiver request with this plat, so I'll pass it on to staff to give you more detail, but it's a ministerial approval.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. So if staff would please like to present on this.
All right, give me a quick second to. Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I can. I can see it.
Okay. All right, MIPP 1901 Stevenson minor plat. It's a request for approval of plat amendment to create a 1 5-acre lot and then a remainder of 35 acres. This is the second consideration before the Plan Commission. They had came a couple months ago and then decided to come back. It's located off 4616 Gibbs Road. I said it's around 5 acres. This did go to a zoning amendment with ZA 1907, and it's changed it from an AG zoning district to an estate zoning in order to plat because the zoning ordinance does not allow agricultural pre-plats. This is the location, and then the blue line would be the 5 lot, and the remainder would be the green line behind it. As you can see, it's surrounded by agricultural zoning with some single-family lots. This is another view of it. Staff does recommend approval of this primary plat with standard conditions. We do have a condition that they indicate a 50-foot right-of-way on both lots instead of just the one as shown on that track.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Questions for staff? Any questions for staff? Okay, could the petitioner please perform your presentation?
Hi, this is Dale Cruz. I'm here this evening on behalf of Tom Holznick, who's the owner of this property now. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So this petition, when it came before you a couple of months ago, the major hangup, the hangup was the dedication of the road right of way all the way around the whole Gibbs Road. If you remember, we had a lot of discussion about that. So the owner has agreed to do that right-of-way dedication. But what he just told me tonight was, or asked me tonight, what he just asked me tonight was, since it's a minor plat, would it be permissible for us to create a 10-acre lot to the right or to the east of the 5-acre lot, along with the 5-acre lot? So it'd be a total of 3 lots instead of these 2. So I just heard that about half an hour ago. And so I thought I'd throw that out there because he asked me, since we're doing a minor plat, which allows 3 lots, could we do a 10, which would be east of the 5, and then the 5, and then the remaining parcel, and then dedicate all of the road right away.
So at this point, Dan, can you or Jody chime in on that request?
Yeah, hi, this is Jody. You cannot do that at this meeting. This needed to be noticed publicly because it is a primary plat and it's a public hearing for that. So at this meeting, you may not go ahead and split more than what was advertised. So if the property owner now wishes to create 3 lots, you'll need to withdraw this petition and file a new one for a 3-lot subdivision.
So he would need to withdraw this one and file a new one? Is
Correct.
that what he said?
Yep, and then go through all of the noticing process. It would be a brand new petition.
Okay, I don't want to do that. So let's proceed as presented.
Okay.
Because, and what I'm thinking is, Jody, is if he really wants to do that, we can withdraw this after, or we don't have to record the plat.
Correct.
So we could come back with a different petition, create 3 lots, and then this one would be void before we ever recorded it.
Correct.
Yeah, so let's proceed as presented.
Jody, this is Charles. There is a time frame before you can refile then, if this is approved tonight, correct?
There isn't, this is Jody, there isn't a time frame if it's a substantially different petition. Since it would be going from a 2-lot to a 3-lot subdivision, I would probably let them file right away.
There are some, this is Dan Taylor, there's sometimes waiting periods if it's denied, but if it's approved, there would be no applicable time period.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Other questions for staff? Okay, if that's the case, then at 7:18, I'd like to open this up for public comments. Mr. Kanin, do we have any? Ryan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. You do not have any public comments on YouTube.
Okay. So at this point, at 7:19, I'm going to close the public hearing. Questions from the commission for either staff or petitioner?
Jim, I do have a question about the 50-foot right-of-way.
Okay.
If you could better describe that to me, because it sounds like all new borders have a 50-foot right-of-way. Is that correct, or is it just the main square for the entire thing as a 50-foot right-of-way?
I can answer that. So the 50-foot right-of-way would start at the south. Can you still see the screen that Des has up that's got the picture of the aerial beside the plat with the 5 acres and the 35 or 34.72 remainder? Can you still see that picture?
Yes.
So do you see where County Road 475 East intersects Gibbs Road at the southeast corner of the property?
Following you, yes.
So the right-of-way dedication would begin there, and it would go west to Gibbs Park, and then it would go north along Gibbs Road, and the right-of-way dedication would stop where Gibbs Road turns and goes west again.
Staff's in agreement with that right away, is that correct? Because we don't have an exhibit showing it, so I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with this right away.
It's basically all of the road frontage that we have.
Staff agrees?
This is Jody. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, at this point, I'll entertain a motion. If someone care to make a motion.
This
Mr.
is
President?
Lindy. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'll let you have the next one, okay?
Deal.
Charles here. I move that we approve MIP 1901 Stevenson minor plat subject to the following conditions. The project receives any necessary review and approval by HCSO and HC Drainage Board. The final plat will comply with all relevant portions of subdivision control ordinance, and a 50-foot right-of-way easement be added continue to both lots.
Is there a second?
Sam Duval,
Second.
second.
Okay. Any questions on the motion? All right, Des or Jody, can we have a vote?
Mr. Newmeyer?
4.
Mr. Petrini,
4.
Mr. Bischoff,
4.
Mr. Duval,
4.
Mr. Guggenberger,
4.
Ms. Albers,
4.
Ms. Ransberg. We have, it's approved.
Thank you,
Thank
Des.
you very
Thank you. Next is docket DPRA 20-4 Crew Car Wash Edition Development Plan Review. Mr. Taylor, again, if you would care to interject here as to what we're doing on this particular item.
Yes, this is a development plan review. That is also a ministerial review. The design and architectural features are reviewed to make sure they conform with all of the provisions of the zoning ordinance, subdivision control ordinance, and other applicable ordinances. This site is located in the tier 1, so there's some additional requirements for tier 1, and does the staff report takes you through all of the tier 1 and then the standards of the zoning ordinance and the subdivision control ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. However, there's also some waivers requested on that. You want to briefly touch on those? Dan?
Yeah, I can talk about the waiver.
Okay. Go ahead.
So this goes a little bit with the development. So I'm just going to go through the development real quick, and then I'll touch up on that waiver.
Okay.
All right. So this is DPRA 20-04 Crew Car Wash. This is the first time we've heard it, the Avon Plan Commission. It was originally approved with the county. It's off 1076 East US Highway 36, and is about 2.4 acres. They're requesting to build a 5,700 square foot interior cleaning building right next to their Crew Car Wash that's there. There was a replat with this to combine the 2 lots. So as you can see that there's the 2 lots here, and let's see if I have a better, there you go. So this is, on the bottom is US Highway 36, and you can see that their driveway goes right up to where there's a drop wall and a retaining wall. So they are unable to have a sidewalk. So when they came in for the new building addition, as you can see on the left-hand side, we had to go through the zoning ordinance, and we noticed that they needed a sidewalk. We were able to talk to the petitioner and with Public Works, and we decided to have that back alleyway connect through both sides, and then that would be the connection point instead of stopping all development because of this unique condition of the road there. As stated, it's in the tier 1 of the US Overlay District. It's surrounded by commercial, most notably Chick-fil-A, Meijer, Crown Plaza, and Papa Murphy Pizza. You can see on the left-hand side that is what they plan on building with the car stacking and the traffic circulation. To the right is the existing building count. I have here the waiver request and the unique conditions, the 5 criteria when looking through this waiver of the SEO. So we recommend approval with the standard conditions. Let me know if you have any questions.
Questions for staff?
This is Sam DeVille. Is there any sidewalk currently in the vicinity that wouldn't be able to be tied into as it loops behind the car wash, since they can't go in front along 36? Instead of just having pedestrians in a back alley, I'm assuming there's going to be some sort of sidewalk built to the rear of the building.
Between the road and that driveway that circles around is a retaining wall, and it just drops into a ditch. There's just no place to put a sidewalk there.
Oh, correct. I mean, on the other side of the building from 36. Since there's no space along 36 to put it, is there going to be a sidewalk on the back side of the building opposite 36?
I mean, it does look like there is a sidewalk on the other side.
Will the sidewalk, I guess I'm asking, I'm roughly familiar with the area. Is there any plans or area for a sidewalk in that area where a sidewalk could be brought up to 36, even if it doesn't pass in front of the building. Kind of wrap a sidewalk around the building, so to speak.
So you want a sidewalk wrapping around the lot? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, around the backside so that people can, walking 36, can follow the sidewalk around the car wash.
I guess that could be, right now, there's nothing of that sort, but I guess you could make that a condition if that's something the commissioners thought would be acceptable.
Yeah, this is Paul Guckenberger. I got a question for you, Des. When this was considered, knowing that anytime that there's a change in a lot and that the non-conforming lot needs to be brought into conformance with ordinances. So an option is that Crew Car Wash could reroute their car lane, right? Was that discussed with the petitioner?
Yeah, we had discussed that and they said that that would be a game ender. That would be a development ender. But you can ask them directly later on when the petitioner speaks as well.
Okay, because we have a sidewalk that is fronting that strip mall to the west. And ordinances were intended to have sidewalks as we develop 36. That's why we put in the overlay. So the petitioner, I'm sure then you explained that to them and they didn't want to have any of that. They said they wouldn't do the development if they had to put a sidewalk in.
Yeah, that they said that they would, moving all that would be detrimental to their development. That's when Ryan can speak about this later. They had some conversations about having that access in the back instead.
Access, when you say access in the back, help me understand that. Is it pedestrian access or car access?
It should, I think it's a car access compared to the, I believe the Thoroughfare plan had future access between that side and as like a road or an access for people to drive through from the next major street over.
So how does
I
that,
don't see a sidewalk going back there either.
yeah,
though.
how does that relate to the waiver of the sidewalk, which is the pedestrian ordinance that we're talking about?
It was just a compromise between the two standards of we needing that access and then them not physically being able to add that sidewalk.
Okay, I'll hold future more questions to the petitioner. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions for staff? At this point, Mr. Kanin, I mean, Des brought up the conversations you had. Do you want to briefly chime in here? Or?
Sure, I'm happy to. Yeah, there are some physical barriers to a sidewalk being constructed there. I would say that if you guys do decide to grant this waiver, the intent wouldn't be that there would be no pedestrian connection there, but it would be done in coordination with some kind of improvement on US 36. The problem is that there's a retaining wall along the front drive, and then the rest of the area from the retaining wall is a drainage swale. And so eventually that whole area would have to be piped. And so the expectation is eventually when NDOT is doing work along US 36, that area will probably get piped. And at that point, we'd be able to put a sidewalk in. So I think that is part of staff's recommendation, is understanding that eventually a sidewalk will still go there. It's just not going to be built by the developer. It'll probably be built at a later time when NDOT is doing some road work in that area.
So, Mr. Cannon, how, instead of assuming that, is there a way that we can, or Mr. Taylor, is there a way that we can put that in a condition somewhere? Because otherwise, it's just hanging out, from my understanding. Is that correct?
It would
Do
be.
we have a retainer where they fund it, and then when it does happen, that's the money that pays for it?
Yeah, that would probably be my suggestion. And you may talk to the petitioner about their willingness to do that. You'll have a couple petitions here tonight where that people are asking for waivers, and that would actually be staff's recommendation, that we create a fund. We currently have an infrastructure contribution fund, which is for road projects. And we'd like to create a sidewalk contribution fund, because on a couple of these projects, it doesn't make sense for the developers to build them. But certainly, you know, all of you are aware that the town has spent millions of dollars creating connectivity in the community where previous sidewalk waivers were granted, and now taxpayers are paying for them. So that would be a good compromise there as well, that potentially they could make a contribution to the sidewalk infrastructure fund, and the town would use that in the future to then build the sidewalks.
Mr. Taylor, do you see any impediments to that suggestion?
No, we've done that before, and I agree with Mr. Kanin.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff?
I have a question for Ryan. This is Grant. Ryan, have we consulted with NDOT on this area? I did a preliminary check, and I know GIS is not very accurate, but it appears that this car wash, the southern fringe there, is encroaching in on the NDOT right of way as it stands right now. But in addition, do we know exactly what NDOT's plans are for this area?
I don't know exactly what NDOT's plans are. As you guys are aware, they are doing an added travel lane project. That project does not include sidewalks. And the petitioner may be able to better answer this, but my recollection from TAC is that wall is literally on the right-of-way line, or maybe 3 inches behind the right-of-way line. If you guys recall, on most of these projects, when they come through that are along US 36, NDOT doesn't permit the sidewalks to be in the right-of-way. They actually require a pedestrian easement that's on the private property, where the sidewalks or the trails are then actually in those easements. And therein lies the problem for the petitioner, is their drive going to the car wash is where we would have to put that easement. And so, Grant, if I had to guess, I'd tell you that encroachment is probably just the way the GIS looks.
Right.
And my guess is that it's right on the line, but I think the petitioner can probably speak to that. But that was kind of our problem, was we didn't even think with NDOT's coordination that they would even allow us to build the sidewalk in the right of way anyway. So the petitioner really is stuck between a rock and a hard place on this one. And that's kind of why staff tried to come up with a solution to kind of work with them on that.
Right. No, I understand. But what could happen is that NDOT needs additional right-of-way in that area, and I'd hate for that to be imposed on the taxpayers at a later date. So that's why I'm asking. So it could be more expensive for the taxpayers in the long run versus let's take care of it now and get it corrected, I guess.
Other questions for staff?
What type of sidewalk would this be along 36? What's the width of the sidewalk? Would it be asphalt, concrete? What would be required there?
A 6-foot concrete sidewalk.
Other questions for
Thanks.
staff? Okay, hearing none, if the petitioner would please like to present their case.
Yeah, good evening, guys. My name is Austin Tracy. I'm with Hamilton Designs. I'm the civil engineer working on this project. I believe Justin Furr with Crew Car Wash is on this call as well, and I know he'll be able to speak more to the owner side of things.
Mr. Tracy, before you go any further, can you go ahead and give your address for the record, please?
Yeah, yep. It's Hamilton Designs at 11988 Fishers Crossing Drive, Suite 154 in Fishers, Indiana.
Thank you.
No problem. So I can speak more to the technical side of things. That drive into the car wash, it's right up against the property line. It's not over the property, but the retaining wall is right on the property line, and maybe a couple inches to 6 inches in certain spots away from that property line. And then right after that, it's the drainage ditch, which takes drainage from our site, and that is routed right through that ditch. We had numerous conversations with staff trying to figure out alternatives there, and And it's not possible to put a sidewalk in that location unless that would be piped and NDOT would allow the sidewalk. There's not really a feasible way to redo the site or redo the drives without having to demo the buildings and move those. And I'm sure you guys can understand demolishing the buildings just not feasible or doable. All the other requirements with staff have been met. The stormwater comments have been coordinated, and we have no issue meeting any of those. We've worked with staff to try to create a plat that brings the site into compliance. With that, we were granting an easement along that north alley per the request from staff. We're really trying to do our best to work with staff and present a project that you guys can approve, that we just have certain limitations. I guess that's kind of it in the nutshell there.
Okay, questions for petitioner?
Yeah, this is Paul Guckenberger. So I'm going to go back to the sidewalks and just explore maybe some other options here, because we have tried to promote walkability in town of Avon. That's why we got the ordinance there and why we want to see sidewalks developed whenever there's a change in the lots. So knowing from what you've described that you can't put it in front because you'd have to tear out the retaining wall and shift everything. I'm going to assume you've done the studies that you'd have to move the buildings. You can't shorten the turn radius with what you would have left after you put the sidewalk in. Would you consider putting sidewalks in and the appropriate lighting that goes to the north around the lot, and to allow that walkability? Because what we're trying to do is we're going to have sidewalks. The intent would be all along 36 there, except your property goes right up to where NDOT's going to build, which I don't know if that's going to be an issue at that time, but assuming that's not an issue, that interrupts the ability to have pedestrian traffic going from east to west.
This is Justin Furr, Director of Real Estate from Crew Car Wash, 10251 Hague Road, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46256. We explored a number of options here, and as you can see, that the site is very tight. In order to get sidewalks, I guess, to the north, to the west, and back to the south around our site, they're really, I'm not sure how we would fit them in, honestly. The turning radiuses to the south, obviously, to get cars around and into the car wash, and then to the north, where we're granting the easement, with the width of that lane and whatever would be proposed in the future, we could explore having a sidewalk along that northern drive. I just don't see how we would fit it in on the western side of the property coming to the south. There's currently a structure there that houses our storage room and dumpster enclosure. It's a rectangle kind of to the northwest side of the site plan. And then as you head to the south, there's also a drainage ditch there as well. The little curved line down near the southwest side of the site, that is also a drainage ditch that's also used as a little bit of stormwater retention. It does hold a little bit of water every so often. So I'm not sure where that sidewalk would go to make a U-shaped connection around the site. But we would consider if it's possible to fit it along the northern boundary. And maybe that connects to the east and west with the other properties that are also, it seems, going to be asked or hopefully to add this lane to connect over to Raceway.
Have you explored your neighbors to see about being able to do sidewalks on the other side of the road?
No, we have not.
Would you be into an agreement and into putting money into a sidewalk fund?
It depends on the amount.
How much?
Yeah, how much?
Well, what would be a fair dollar amount to you? What do you believe would be a fair dollar amount?
I'd have to understand where the sidewalk was going and the footage of it and get a get a price put together, a 6-foot concrete sidewalk, and unless one of the engineers on the call wants to give me an idea per foot of a 6-foot concrete sidewalk.
Well, I'll wait for your engineers to respond, but yeah, I've already got an estimate for you.
$30 a foot is what I typically use.
To add to that, Ryan, what the unique characteristics of that particular site, would that increase the cost of the sidewalk? Since it's, I guess some of it would be footed by INDOT for 36 repairs, but given the unique characteristics of that site, would more work have to be done for the sidewalk to increase the cost?
I don't think so. I think those would be more drainage expenses versus costs of actually building the sidewalk. So I'm not sure if that would be fair to them or not, but I guess that's up to your guys' discretion.
Excuse me, just to be clear, I was talking about a sidewalk to the northern boundary of the property, not the southern. I'm of the opinion that that's highly unlikely any sidewalk will be on the southern boundary unless INDOT changes their longstanding decision that you don't have sidewalks in the right of way.
Other questions for petitioner? Okay, at this point, I'd like to open up the public hearing at 7:43. Mr. Kanin, has anybody signed up to speak or any comments?
Jim, are we actually reviewing the case at hand, or were we just reviewing the sidewalk then? Petition.
The case at hand.
I do have a couple questions on the case at hand.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay, so I withdraw my opening up for public comment, so go ahead.
With this auxiliary building, it's apparent that you're losing a queuing lane. Have you done a traffic study to show us that we're not going to impact that intersection? Because with all the 3 queuing lanes and the fast pass lane, it does go out into the roadway sometimes and does stop traffic. Have you given any thought or consideration on how we're going to alleviate this issue?
We have not done an official traffic study, no, but I can tell you, since we opened the car wash to the west on Rockville Road, this location, to my knowledge, hasn't had any of the previous backups that it had before we opened that location to the west out onto Rockville Road. The added services do not add to the amount of business necessarily. You have to go through the exterior car wash in order to get an interior car wash, and it would not back up any of the flow through the site. We only sell enough of the interior car washes to fill the stacking as shown. We have this very concept in Noblesville and have not had any issues with traffic flow, as we don't want to block the flow of the exiting traffic from the exterior with the interior washes. And with experience, we know that people don't want to wait that long to get the inside of their car clean. But we also don't sell them to allow that stacking to block the flow of exiting exterior wash customers.
The condition that was put on your Brownsburg location, I sat on that board when we put that condition there. Would you guys be willing to that same type of condition here, to where you actually turn away customers if it does stack to the roadway?
We could consider it, sure.
Other questions for staff? I'm sorry, for petitioner. Other questions for petitioner? All right, then at 7:46, I'm going to open this up for public comment. Mr. Kanin, has anyone asked to speak on this or comment?
You, at the moment, you have no comments, but you may give them a minute in case somebody wants to type something.
Okay.
I still have nothing.
Okay. If that's the case, at 7:48, I'm going to close the public comment and then commission any additional questions, comments for petitioner or staff.
This is Paul Guggenberger. I have a question for Ryan. We've talked about on the north side, potentially that road would be a connector to other properties. Is that correct?
Yeah, the town's thoroughfare plan shows an access road here, and the thoroughfare plan contemplated that eventually, and it's happening sooner than later in this area, that this area will no longer be full access. Only in areas where there are traffic signals will properties along US 36 have access to traffic signals. So we showed a backage road connecting through these properties all the way over to Raceway Road, which would eventually give cars access to Raceway. And then there is a signal on this west property limit of the Crew Car Wash. And so in this area, because of the depth of the properties, we don't anticipate it to be a public street, but we do want to allow cars to potentially ingress and egress, especially the properties in the middle, like the liquor store. And even if you guys recall, those of you who were on here when Take 5 came through the oil change facility, they too provided an easement along the back of the property. And the commercial development at the corner of Raceway and 100 North also provided that easement. So we've been requiring an easement along the back of those properties for car access.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for petitioner or staff?
This is Grant. Austin, the engineer, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Quick question. As far as the boundary is concerned, have you had a recent boundary survey on this area? I'm back to the south right away again.
Yep, yeah, we for the updated plat. So
okay.
yeah, within the past month.
You said they didn't show any encroachments. There's roughly about 6 inches or so inside the property line.
Yeah, it's not perfectly parallel to it. It varies a little bit.
Right.
Other questions, petitioner or staff? Hearing none.
Jim, this is Paul Guggenberger again. Just one more. Again, I'm going back and I'm looking at an aerial view of that plot. So back to the petitioner. Knowing you have the landscape barrier there to do your lane traffic there, can that not be removed and move your traffic north? So you can move your wall north, allowing for a sidewalk.
No, unfortunately, there's a minimum distance between the back of the curb to the south and the entrance to the conveyor of the car wash as you go north toward the building. So it's not as simple as just moving the drive to the north. The entire building, the conveyor, all the machinery and everything would have to also move north. Otherwise, the customer can't get their car straight before they have to line their tire up to get in we call it the yoke, but it's a Y that directs your tire into the conveyor.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Hearing
Justin,
none.
your engineer get back to you on a cost of what that frontage sidewalk would cost you?
No, I was hoping Austin or Greg or someone would answer that question for me.
I came up with 7,500. Would you agree to 7,500 for the fund of the sidewalks?
Yes, we would.
Before I'd agree with 7,500 though, Charles, I'd want to hear what Ryan thinks the appropriate cost would be, so that to have that countered there to make sure we have it covered, because I really hate to get a light contribution when it's going to cost us double that.
That is fine. We can double check
Right.
my math.
Ryan indicated the $30 per foot. I don't have a scale in front of me or know the length, but is that how you come up with the 7,500?
It is. I have a length of 2,400 or 240 feet.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable.
Other questions? Okay, if there's no other questions, I will entertain a motion on the waiver. Anyone?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion on the waiver that we approve it with the contingency that an escrow payment of 7,500 be given to the Avon Township Sidewalk Fund.
Is there a second on the motion from the waiver?
Paul Guckenberger, second.
Okay.
Just a note, if I could, this is Jody. Mr. Bischoff referenced the township sidewalk fund. It should be the town of Avon.
I'll correct myself, the Town of Avon Sidewalk Fund.
Are you okay with that, Paul?
I second that one.
Okay. All right, any more discussion? All right, Jody, if we could have a roll call on the waiver.
Mr. Petrini,
For,
Mr. Bischoff,
Or
Mr. Duval,
Sam Duval, 4.
Mr. Guckenberger,
4.
Ms. Albers,
4.
Mr. Niemeyer, Mr. Niemeyer,
Grant, you're muted.
Sorry, 4.
waiver is approved.
thank you. Is there a motion on the DPR? Hello?
Were we going to make it a requirement to turn away the customers if they stacked in the road like Charles mentioned?
I assume that would be in a motion if we make a motion to do that
Okay.
as a condition.
Mr. President, I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Okay.
I move that we approve DPR 20-04 crew car wash building additions subject to the following conditions. In revised plans must comply with all commitments and conditions noted as part of any approval granted. The petitioner must post a landscape bond prior to the issuance of the COO, and the development shall comply with all relevant portions of town code and comments by Public Works, Fire Department, CRE at the pre-construction meeting. And crew car wash is to notify any potential customers to turn away once stacking impedes on public roadways.
Lindy Albers, I second it.
Okay, just for my personal clarification, Mr. Taylor, is there anything, I mean, is there any clarification we need on that last condition?
I think that was well said.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments on the motions?
And that condition applies to all customers of the car wash, whether it's the new business or the traditional car wash, correct?
Correct, for crew car wash.
Okay. Any more questions? Jody, if we could have a vote, please.
Mr. Bischoff,
Or
Mr. Duval,
4,
Mr. Guckenberger,
4,
Mr. Albers,
4,
Mr. Niemeyer,
Or
Mr. Petrius.
4.
Car wash is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, docket number DPR 20-6, Countryside Crossing Development Plan Review. Another DPR. Mr. Taylor, if you could briefly review that again.
Yes, this is a development plan review, Countryside Crossing. That's a ministerial approval. There is a waiver request. So you'll need to handle the waiver. The waiver is discretionary, and you may, as you just did, place conditions on any waiver approval. And the staff also has conditions with its recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. And Des, before you even present, I don't have a waiver request in what I've printed out. Am I missing something, or is that just part of the DPR itself?
That's on me.
No?
I forgot to include it.
Okay.
But it is in the DPR,
Okay.
the
All
staff
right.
report.
Well, if you would care to present that, please.
All right. DPR 20-06 Countryside Crossing. This is the first consideration before the Plan Commissioner. Commissioners may approve, deny, approve with conditions, or continue the petition. It's located near the intersection of Dan Jones and County Road 100. It's about 4 acres. They request to build the storage facility, the duplexes, 26 duplexes, and the little commercial area as well. So this came through as a PUD, and it created a mixed-use PUD of industrial, residential, and commercial spaces. They then came back and did primary plat and created individual lots for the PUD. As you can see, it's in a PUD field. The parcel zone PUD Countryside Crossing and currently contains farmland. The property to the north is AG and contains single-family homes. To the east, the property is zoned Hendrix County and contains Lakeland Farms single-family subdivision. To the south, the property is zoned PUD and contains the future south is Hendrix County and contains. So this first development is actually going to split it, the PUD. We're going to do the upper half of the PUD with the commercial and industrial and residential, and then we'll come back later. They'll come back later to do the other side. Across is Kingsway Church. This is a little bit better outlay. And as you can see, this is the first phase where you can see the commercial outlot, the self-storage area, the pond, and then the residential duplexes. They are also bringing in the protected forest area right there to the south, next to the future development. The waiver is for there's 150 between the road, the first road into the commercial lot. There was no way to move it, so meet the requirement. So we decided to have it line up with the future development entrance to the furthest part, which was possible before getting in the way of the drainage pond. Staff does recommend approval of this development. Let me know if you have any questions.
Questions for staff? Any questions for staff? Okay. Hearing none, petitioner could please present their case.
Hey, Ryan.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Can you unmute my phone?
I think I just did, but I think you're going to get an echo, Greg, but here, I'll do it.
Okay. Okay.
Can you hear me there?
How do I do this?
Can you hear me there?
I can, yes.
Dustin, are you there?
I am.
Okay.
Okay.
We're having some audio issues, so bear with me. Des, if you want to
pull up the
PowerPoint.
Yep. Give me a quick second while I redo this.
Are you guys hearing an echo from me, or am I just hearing the echo?
I hear the echo.
I apologize.
Just let me know when to change the page.
Okay, I will make this quick. So we're here
on behalf of MDW
Realty for the Countryside Crossing Development Plan near the southeast intersection of Dan Jones and 100 North. Next slide, please. Some of these are going to be similar to what Jess showed. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So there's six parcels included within the property. The overall PUD that was approved previously. Go ahead and go next slide. Surrounding zoning, we've got Hendrix County to the south of us, and then agricultural for the single family use that's north of us, and then R2 to the west, and the C4 to the west is Countryside Meadows, which is actually the same developer. Next slide. So the overall site plan you've seen a handful of times through the PUD process. We've got two commercial outlots fronting Dan Jones, the storage unit parcel to the north of the main drive, independent living to the south, and then it leads into the duplexes on the far east, which connects then through 100 North. Go ahead, next slide. Here's just a detail of the duplex, the 27 lots, so 54 units total. Next slide. I know Tom Montgomery, the architect, is on the call as well, so he might be able to speak to these if you have questions, but here's typical elevations of the duplexes. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Go ahead. And then we also have the storage units are being designed, and next slide we'll have the architecturals of those. So that's the climate controlled 2-story. Next slide. And then here are the single story overheads that are not climate controlled. Next slide. So you got elevation view and then also a plan view. Okay, next. And then these are just the different buildings about the layout of the storage unit parcel. Next slide. Keep going. And then we've got the commercial outlet, the north commercial outlet, which actually will hold the leasing office for the storage units, and that's the connectivity that you see there to the south of the building. Next slide will be the architectural of that building. So that's the west face or west elevation, which will be fronting Dan Jones. Next slide. And then landscaping in conjunction with the approved PUD plan had the 40-foot buffer about the perimeter and the landscaping requirements set forth by the PUD. Next slide. similar, meeting the street tree requirements as well as the perimeter buffering planning requirements. And then this is the waiver request that Des mentioned. Ordinance is 150 feet from stop bar to leading edge of the drive. Due to the depths of the commercial lots, 150 foot, as you can see in those dimensions, would basically put the drives to the back of the parcels. So we're offering 125 foot and 102 foot in conjunction with the proposed layouts. Next slide. And with that, I'll have be happy to answer any questions or get the architect involved with questions with regards to that.
This is Jim Petrini. Can you go back a slide? So the 125 is the entrance, or is that the 102?
The 125 is the southern entrance, and then the 102 is the northern entrance.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Petitioner?
I got one, Jim. With the future development to come in the future, what type of truck traffic do you anticipate on regular deliveries for that building?
I'll let Mark Jackson, he is on the phone to speak with regards to that.
Hi, I think you're talking about the independent living?
Correct, yes. Does it have a cafeteria that's going to have a food truck coming every day? Does it have semi trucks supplying it? That's going to create issues at this 102 foot.
And no, with the independent living, we have very minimal food service. There would be a trash pickup. Yes, the occasional delivery of materials, but nothing like the typical assisted living or the skilled nursing across the street.
Box trucks is what we're basically talking about then.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Any other questions for Petitioner? Hearing none, I'm going to open this up to public comment at 8:09. Mr. Kanin, has anybody asked to comment?
Not yet, Mr. Petrini.
Give it a few seconds.
Still none.
Okay, in that case, at 8:10, I'm going to close it to public comments. At this point, do we have any more questions for staff or Petitioner? Hearing none, would anyone like to make a motion on the waiver?
Sam Duval, I move that we approve DPR 20-06 Countryside Crossing, subject to the following conditions.
And
one, any revised plans must.
Hang on, Henry. We need the waiver first.
Waiver.
On page 1, under H, Appendix A. Waiver.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the installation of a drive separation of less than 150 foot.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second, Paul Guggenberger.
Thank you. Discussion on the waiver motion? Okay. Des, roll call vote, please.
Guggenberger,
Can you,
4,
Albers,
4,
Mr. Niemeyer,
4,
Mr. Petrini,
4.
Mr. Bischoff,
4.
Mr. Duval.
4.
Waiver is approved.
Thank you. Now we can accept a motion on the DPR.
Okay, I'll do it right this time. Sam Duval, I move that we approve DPR 20-06 Countryside Crossing, subject to the following conditions. 1, any revised plans must comply with all commitments and conditions noted as part of any approval granted. 2, the petitioner must post landscape bond prior to issuance of certificate of occupancy. And 3, the development shall comply with all relevant portions of town code and comments by Public Works, Fire Department, DLZ at the pre-construction meeting.
Is there a second?
Lindy
I'll second.
Albers, second.
Any discussion on the motion? Okay, at this point, Des, if you would like to have a vote on that, please.
Mr. Niemeyer, Mr. Niemeyer,
4. You hear
Mr.
me?
Petrini,
4.
Mr. Bischoff,
4.
Mr. Duval,
4.
Mr. Kuchenberger,
4.
Ms. Albers.
4.
Is approved.
Thank you.
Good deal. And Ryan, I didn't realize you unmuted my computer, so I could have avoided that echo the entire time. Sorry about that. Thanks all.
Okay, moving on, docket MAPA 20-04 replat of Lot 2, Ronald Reagan Crossing, major plat amendment. Mr. Taylor, if you could comment on this briefly, please.
This is a replat. We don't see this a lot, but replats are treated just like primary plats. This is a request to turn one lot into 2 lots. And so it is treated just like other plats. We just don't see these a lot. And staff's recommended a couple conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Staff, if you'd like to present, please.
Oh, sorry. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. This is MAPA 20-04 replat of Lot 2 of Reagan Crossing. This is a plat amendment. This is the first consideration before the Plan Commission. Commissioners may approve, deny, approve the conditions, or continue the petition. This petition is located at 10325 East County Road 100 North. It's about 2.7 acres, and they want to split one lot into 2 lots. This has a bit of history since it's in the Reagan Crossing PUD. Most notably, it was actually developed with DPR 18-23 Rainbow Childcare. It's like Kindercare. The Plan Commission approved an 11,900 square foot childcare facility. This will be located to the right. You can see it's the Reagan Crossing. Right now, it has the Kindercare, but the lot that they want to develop future is vacant. To the north is the IUS hospital. And then to the south, east, and west, it's surrounded by the Reagan Crossing uses. This is what the petitioner wants to do. To the right will be where the Kindercare is, and then to the left will be a future development. They are doing a shared access agreement, so they'll only have one access off of to get on the main road right here. They will not be able to get on Country Road 100. Everything else meets the requirements. Staff recommends approval of this replat. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Questions for staff? No questions for staff? Okay, hearing none. I will open this up for public comments at 8:17. Mr. Kanin, has anyone asked to comment or present any comments? Mr. Kanin?
None yet.
Okay.
Still none, Mr. Petrides.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. In that case, at 8:18, I'll close public comments. So any other questions for petitioner or staff?
Mr. President, is there a petitioner presentation?
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you for that, Paul. Petitioner, could please present, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good evening. My name is John Shatarski with 814 Development. Address is 3221 West Big Beaver, Suite 111, Troy, Michigan, 48084. The slide that Des had up really would suffice. We're simply looking to split this lot 2 of Reagan Crossing PUD from a 2.47 acre lot into a 1.19 acre lot, which is currently occupied by the Kindercare development, and split the west half of the lot off to a 1.2 acre portion for future development. Both parcels will be covered under a cross access and cross parking agreement. And I saw in the note that agreement is drafted in a manner that would not infringe upon any of the previously committed to zoning requirements. The largest being the parking requirement of 27 spaces for the Kindercare.
Questions for petitioner? Any questions for petitioner? Okay. In that case, I'm going to reopen for public comment at 8:19. Just because the petitioner didn't get to present before that. So Mr. Cannon, still going to give it a couple seconds if anyone's asked to comment.
Yes, currently you have none.
Thank you. Still none, Mr. Cannon?
Still none.
Okay, if that's the case at 8:20. I'm going to close public comment. And now at this point, does the Planning Commission have any questions or comments for either petitioner or staff?
This is
Quick
Paul
question for
Guggenberger.
staff.
Go ahead,
With
Charles.
the shared entrance agreement, does that stick to this plat? It doesn't have to be a condition, correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
The shared entrance agreement that you mentioned, that the plats were going to share,
Yes.
that sticks to this plat and does not have to be a condition on the approval, correct?
Yeah, yeah, they're signing the shared access agreement. Yeah, it would be with this, it'd run with this property.
Yeah, this is Jody. If I could just interject, that access agreement would be recorded as part of this plat. So it would follow the current and any future owners.
Thanks, staff.
Thank you, Jody. Other questions for petitioner or staff? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. Mr. Grant, I move that we approve MAP A replat of Lot 2, Reagan Crossing. Plat amendment subject to the following conditions. Prior to the recording a plat, any revised plans must comply with all commitments and conditions noted as part of any approval granted. The final plat will comply with relevant portions of the subdivision control ordinance.
Paul Guckenberger, second.
Thank you. Any questions on the motion? Okay, Des, if you could perform a vote, please.
Mr. Duval,
Sam Duval, 4.
Mr. Bistroff,
In favor.
Mr. Petridis,
4.
Mr. Niemeyer,
4.
Ms. Albers,
Ms. Albers, you're muted.
4.
Mr. Guggenberg,
Paul Guckenberger, 4.
all right, motion's approved.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Moving on, DPRA 20-05 O'Reilly Auto Parts Development Plan Review. Again, Mr. Taylor, just briefly.
It's a DPR. It's a non-discretionary review. Again, need to make sure that it's compliant with all of our ordinances. This project is in Tier 1, so you'll need to pay attention to that in your review. And there is a sidewalk issue on this case as well, and staff's made a recommendation of a condition on this one, so we're going to return to that subject as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. So at this point, if the staff would care to present, please.
Next up is DPRA 20-05 O'Reilly Auto Parts Development Plan Review. This is the first consideration before the Plan Commission. Commissioners may approve, deny, approve with conditions, or continue the petition. It's located off 7752 Cobble Spring Drive. The parcel size is 1.27 acres, and they're requesting a development plan to build a 7,390 square foot O'Reilly Auto Parts. This was a splash car wash originally, and it was approved in 1996 by Hendrix County. This petition was also part of the overall Avon Crossing Shopping Center. As you can see, they were granted a couple of variances from the BZA to reduce the front yard from 20 feet to 16 feet, and the petition was granted a variance to reduce the side yard setback from 10 feet to 5 feet to allow the loading area to face a public street. The current parcel is zoned SE and contains the old splash car wash building. To the north, the property is zoned SC and contains the Lifeway Apostolic Church. To the east, the property is zoned SC and contains a 3-tenant building where Domino's, Any Labs Now, and Touchman's Cleaners is located. To the south, the property is zoned C2 and contains Aqua Systems and Huntington Bank. To the west, the property is zoned C2 and contains a strip mall that contains Avon Sports Apparel, AT&T, and Deci's Mexican Ice Cream. This is the location. As you can see, it's in the Tier 1 of the U.S. Overlay District. To the right-hand side, you can see the layout of the building, the parking and sidewalks, and then the loading area. So there is a thing with the sidewalk again. I guess you could say this also be put in the sidewalk fund or something like that. I believe Ryan said that building that now, it wouldn't have to match up with how they're building their sidewalk, and they're not sure exactly how that is. I mean, I'll turn that over to Ryan if he wants to speak about that more.
Yes, thanks, Des. As Des mentioned, the town is actually doing a sidewalk project along this north side of US 36, and we're going to build sidewalks from Park Place subdivision all the way to Dan Jones Road. So the design of their sidewalk along US 36 isn't exactly going to match ours. We've already bid our project and awarded it to a contractor, and we already have NDOT permits. So this one was one where we felt like this made a lot of sense, that to grant them the waiver along US 36, and in lieu, if they were willing to make a contribution for the value of the sidewalk, or if we want to use a similar valuation to what we did, with crew, I would be fine with that as well. And so as a condition of that waiver, have them make a contribution. Happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Ryan, when looking at this, due to the computer I'm looking at, I can't see the length across the frontage there. Do you know approximately what that lot size, what that length is, the width of that lot? Can you?
I'm sorry, I don't. I don't know if Des has something. I'm kind of the same way, Jim. I'm looking at a computer screen. I don't have a way to measure it, so.
Des, do you know?
Jim, if I could
Find,
interject.
let me check if I can find a better.
Mr. Petrini,
Yes.
are you looking at that length so that you can establish a contribution?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that what we've done in the past, and Ryan mentioned this earlier, is use the standard of $30 per lineal foot.
Okay.
And then we don't have to do the math. Ryan does the math administratively, and that might solve your problem. Would that be okay, Ryan?
Yes, that would be fine. The petitioner may be able to provide information on the length as well.
Great, thank you.
I can say I just measured, it's roughly about 180 to 190 feet on the frontage.
Thank you.
Is this better for you guys? Can you see better?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, 185 feet.
This is Paul Guckenberg. I got a question for Ryan. So when we're talking about the sidewalk fund, since this lot has 2 front yards, we would consider sidewalks on 36 and on that drive. So when you're doing the sidewalk design, are you considering the sidewalk on Cobble Spring Drive?
No, we are not. Good question, Paul. We are just constructing the sidewalk along US 36. And so it does look like they already have a sidewalk there. And so I would suggest that they still build the sidewalk on Cobble Springs Drive. So the waiver would just be for US 36.
Okay, so are you saying there is a sidewalk there on Cobble Spring Drive?
No, I don't believe there is one today, but their plans show constructing one. So the waiver would just be for the sidewalk on 36.
Okay.
Other questions for staff? Okay.
I do have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Should we not have received, I did not receive a plan set for this petition. Did anyone else receive it and I just missed it?
Des?
I loaded them all through the scanner, so I'll double check exactly which ones were, if it was missed or not. I'll double check that. Sorry about that if you didn't get it.
I'm seeing at least some of the O'Reilly Auto Parts in doc 087. Page 33.
Of the agenda?
I don't know if it's part of the agenda package or not. It's from Dez's email. It's the one that's named doc 087.
I just did not get that one. I got 8890, and I got both of those twice.
It was hard to send a clean cut of the whole thing because it was too big for the email to be sent to people. So I had to try to chop it down a bit into 2 bits. Hopefully I chopped it in the right places. I apologize if there are any pages missing.
Just so you know, Des, you're the young one. You're supposed to have all this technology stuff figured out. Just an observation. Just saying.
Not all millennials are good at technology.
Okay. So other questions for staff in the meantime? If not, petitioner could please give their presentation. Petitioner, hello?
I see him on here. Looks like his mic's muted.
Petitioner, you need to unmute yourself. Or Des, if you know who it is, I can unmute him.
Yeah, it's Bobby Dietz.
Okay.
Bobby, are you there? Hello.
Yeah, it looks like he does not have audio or.
My
I
screen.
do have his number on here. Maybe I'll give him a call. Sorry, I'm calling the petitioner now.
Okay.
I'm just moving in here.
Bobby, can you hear us? Hello?
Oh, no, he should have had a link. Okay. No, I'm saying he's showing up on the.
Deci, just put on the chat a number to call.
Would it be possible while we're waiting for Des to try to make that connection, could we move to the next case if Jody could present it? I don't know if Jody's prepared to do that.
I was going to ask Mr. Taylor if that would be appropriate.
Yeah, she may do that.
Okay.
And I think Jody's fully capable.
So, okay, so I'd like to table this for right now. Let's move on to DPR 20-7, WS Gibbs Memorial Park. Jody or Des, if you'd like to present while we're waiting for technical difficulties.
Excuse me, Mr. President,
Yes.
I need to recuse myself from this case, a conflict of interest.
Okay.
So,
Okay, Jody, if you or Des would care to present while we're working on technical difficulties.
Yeah, I would be happy to talk. I don't have any control over the PowerPoint though.
Okay.
Gibbs Park wants to start developing phase 1 of their overall site development. As you're aware, Gibbs Park is in the southwest area of town. Oh, thank you. Des, you pulled it up. Des, are you available to talk? Okay. The parcel size is 68 acres.
I'm waiting on the call, so I can't speak until I get that phone call, if that's okay with you guys.
Nope, that's fine. Just need to.
All right. All right. So this is DPR 20-07, WS Gibbs Memorial Park, Phase 1. This is the first consideration before the Plan Commission. Commissioners may approve, deny, approve with conditions, or continue the petition. It's located at 4541 Gibbs Road, and this first phase is about 68 acres. This first development phase will practically be about the infrastructure, the driveways, the ponds, and the parking areas. This is the first petition for this property. It's located right off of Gibbs Road, near the earlier Stinson property. As you can see, it's all zoned AG and contains farmland. As you can see to the right, this is what the initial phase is with the drainage pond, the trails, parking, and the parking lots. There were some discussions between Ryan Kanin and the petitioners about the dedicated right-of-way and some of the sidewalk requirements. So I'll leave that to Ryan.
Thank you, Des. Ryan, would you care to comment on that? Mr. Cannon?
Sure. Yeah, I think you guys do have two waivers. One is for a sidewalk and the other is for the town ordinance requires a dedicated left turn lane at all entrances on thoroughfares. In this situation, the petitioner has made us aware that based on some design restrictions that it's pretty cost prohibitive. Based on this first phase of the park, we don't necessarily believe that it's necessary. So while they are asking for a waiver, they've asked if we would be willing to grant the waiver if they delayed the construction of the left turn lane until phase 2 of the park, which will have more intense amenities. And so staff is agreeable with this proposal that if we do give them the waiver, that they would build it later. We do have some precedent of doing this in the past. The Crossroads Church on County Road 100 South had a similar commitment. Their first phase of the church didn't require the left turn lane, but when they do their expansion, it will require it. So staff is in agreement with that, and I believe the petitioner is acceptable to that as well.
Mr. Cannon, before we move further, you said there's two waivers, and I don't see that in my package, and maybe I'm just missing that. Could you just give me a bullet point on what those two are?
Yeah, and I sorry, I could misspeak, and I may leave it to the petitioners. The two issues I know that we were talking about was sidewalks, and the second one was the dedicated left turn lane on Gibbs Road. And so, unless I'm wrong, Des can correct me if he wants to, or the petitioner.
Okay.
I don't see those part of the package either. Can we address those tonight?
Hello?
I'm sorry. Oh, you guys broke up.
This is Charles. Mike is doing something funny to me. But I'm not seeing those waivers as part of the package. Would we not have to do that as a public notice to address those waivers tonight?
Mr. Taylor?
Well, there's no special requirement for an extra notice for the waiver. The public notices about the case would have the case detail in it. So I think you're allowed to hear it if you want to. If you don't have information that will allow you to intelligently decide the case, of course, you should continue.
Mr. Taylor, before you're done, this is the one, since we flipped the one case, any other comments on this DPR before we move forward? Because I skipped you on that, as I did with all the other cases. Any other outstanding issues? No, apparently not. All right, so my recommendation and the way I'm going to proceed right now is let the petitioner speak, and then we can make a decision if we want to do something without the waivers being here.
Real quick, I understand what the waiver is for the left turn lane, but what would the waivers for the sidewalks be? What's the information on the sidewalks?
Des or Jody?
I'll answer it. I believe your request was at this time, there's no sidewalks adjacent to the park. And so they were asked about sidewalks at this time.
We're getting some feedback. Did you catch that?
I guess they said that no sidewalks at this time. Does that mean there's gonna be sidewalks at the future phase? Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't believe.
Yes, that would be. Sorry, Ryan.
No, go ahead, Ryan. You can.
Yes, that is correct. What we would like to do is install the sidewalks in the future. There's going to be multiple phases of development, so the opportunity to hold our feet to the fire for the sidewalks and the turning lane is definitely going to come. Phase one is just a building block for a large-scale nature park.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jim,
Other
I do-
questions for staff?
So I do have a question, and Charles had asked this, that there's no indication, at least in the materials I'm reviewing right now, that indicate either the waivers being requested. So Dan, I guess I would ask you that, or Jody, for public notice that seems like the information is incomplete if that's what's been published. So if it's not, that's what I want to make sure of.
Des or Jody, do you want to just talk about how this was noticed?
And I'm sorry if Des isn't otherwise on a phone call. He should answer that. He's the project manager for this project, and he would have put the public notice in the newspaper. In addition to our town legal notice, the petitioner sends a notice to adjacent property owners, and we put a sign out on the property letting folks know, just driving by, saying, hey, something's going on here. And they can always come into town hall or call and email to get a copy of the project.
Do they need to know about the waivers? Is that part of public notice, or is that not necessarily part of
Yeah,
the
the
public
waivers
notice?
should have been included as part of the letters.
Okay.
And then again, I don't know the exact wording. Des may have put in the legal notice that the petitioner was requesting 2 waivers, but I don't know what that said.
Des, are you available yet?
Yes, the legal notice did not include the 2 waivers.
Can I join the discussion real quickly? This is Jessica Hartman, engineer.
Can you give us your address real quick, Jessica?
Civil Engineering Consultants, 1285 South Jackson Street, Suite B, Greencastle, Indiana, 46135.
Thank you, Jessica.
So the initial request had a waiver requesting, you'll see it, a swap of bicycle parking spaces for vehicle.
Can you hear me? Yes, it did. But when I did the math and you only included the 68 acres that you're doing with your first development, and it met the requirement. I mean, you didn't need the waiver. Only if you were doing that with the whole acreage did the math work out that way. So then that waiver was nulled because it was not necessary, or at least I didn't add it.
What is the timetable of the construction of all this? Is it possible that we approve the DPR tonight and you come back with the waivers next month?
No, your rules require you to approve waivers first. So you couldn't do that unless you suspended your own rules. But again, I would just note that our notices are designed to give the public and neighbors notice there is a case. And there's no statute that says that you have to, these waivers are not separate cases. So I don't think you have a notice problem. I think if the Plan Commission has adequate information about the waivers, that they feel they can make a decision, that you have the right to go forward with a decision I don't think it's a notice issue to the public, because the legal requirements for notice just alert people that there is a case involving this property. If you want to go see the details, which in a DPR are a lot of details, then you need to get on the website or go to town hall and do your own investigation. So again, I think the real question is not what the notice said. I think it's just, as a planning commission, if you feel comfortable that you have enough knowledge or can gain enough knowledge tonight to make a decision on the waiver. So I just don't want to get hung up on what the legal notice said, because waivers are not separate cases.
I would recommend that we listen to the petitioner, and then if we make motions on the waivers such that it doesn't relieve the petitioner's responsibilities, it just delays that responsibility to meet those conditions.
Okay, before we move forward, any more questions for staff? Okay, hearing none at this point, if the petitioner would like to present their case with as much information as possible about the waivers that would be required, that would be appreciated.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ryan Limley, the Superintendent of Hendrix County Parks. I'm coming in front of you today to ask for your blessing for our Phase 1 development of the nature park. This has been something our park board has planned for approximately 10 years, and we are to the timeline where we can make progress. We have support from our commissioners, our council. We have started making some minor progress on the ground with our grounds crew, clearing out the heart of the woods. But what Phase 1 will encompass is our basic building block for the 140-acre nature park. So we are putting roadways, parking lots, the ponds into as a building block for future amenities. So we will have a disc golf course, a shelter in the northern heart of the woods, another shelter by the pond, a dock. Those would be included in Phase 2. And then if we have additional funding, we would include restrooms. As we make future development on the left-hand side where you see future phase, we will have a nature center, our office complex, and also a maintenance hub in that location. So we're going to have a tremendous amount of development over the next several years at this park. It's going to take some time. Our waiver request for the turning lane, Jessica Hartman did calculations on that. That is something we did not originally budget into the project. That was about $130,000. And to be honest, that is our entire remediation allowance for this project. So if anything, the pond lining would go south. If we were required to do the turning lane in Phase 1, it could be a potential deal breaker. We're requesting the same with sidewalks, that we would install sidewalks in future phases or as needed. These sidewalks are not as much as a deal breaker. If you want and wish us to install those in Phase 1, we're prepared to do so. If we could get an extension for future phases, that would be great. But our big to-do is the turning lane for the park, and that being a deal breaker. So I don't know if a further clarification is needed, but feel free to ask questions away. We're extremely excited for the project. John Hall Construction is our vendor. We've given them the notice of award. We are not issuing the contract and notice to proceed until we have your blessing for the project. Our park board is prepared to do so when and if we receive your blessing.
Jessica, could you do a little bit of discussion about the turning lane, the issues, and what we're looking at here? You're muted, by the way. Thank you.
Yes, and I don't know if Des can put up our slide that kind of overlaid the turning lane. So essentially what we're trying to comply with is the commercial and industrial drive detail in your construction standards, which I understand applies in all cases regardless of traffic count. And so the geometry on that requires us to have 1,000 feet of frontage. Des, it was in our PowerPoint. I don't know if you have access to that. Anyway, when you lay the geometry on there, due to the proximity to the 90-degree curve, there's some difficulties. I think the cost was probably shocking about how expensive that was. It's over 800 tons of asphalt plus, another subgrade treatment underneath that. So these turn lanes are quite expensive, and we would have to get additional right away from the adjacent neighbors. Now, your petition earlier tonight on the other side of the road with the 50-foot right away dedication could certainly make that a little bit easier. So, and from an engineering technical perspective, that roadway, a traffic count was done in October of last year. It has 332 vehicles a day. Peak hours, 30 vehicles. It's nowhere near close to warranting a left or a right turn lane if we were doing it based on that. And now I understand that that's not the procedure, but that's just the engineering behind it.
At this point, do we have any questions from the commission for Jessica or Petitioner?
So this is Paul Guckenberger. I'd like to follow up on the left turn lane. Is that something that you're okay with doing in the future phase? I just want to understand, because the way you described it is your position that a left turn lane isn't necessary and you're actually seeking relief from having to install left turn lane at all?
From an engineering perspective, that was my starting footprint is this warranted? And so I've got all the data that backs that up, that it's not. I think the discussions between Ryan Lemley and Ryan Kanin is more of a negotiation and talking about what's best for the town, what's best for the park. So they would have to speak to, whether they want to phase that in next phase.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Petitioner or Jessica?
Sam Duval for the petitioner. Upon completion of phase 1, what will be in place as a draw to this park, just to kind of gauge what might be there to bring people in?
We will have hiking trails. My time in the DNR surveys that we had 80% of folks that came to state parks, they came to hike trails in our surveys we had. I worked at Raccoon Lake the last 12 years as the assistant manager. Also the pond, we have worked with DNR to make this a consumptive fishery pond. So we're working on the details, the park board and DNR, to make this a consumptive fishery. So when the pond is filled, DNR would stock, manage, enforce rules and regulations. So that is going to be a unique feature that this property needed. Unlike McLeod Nature Park, we had big walnut that went through the center. We didn't have that. This lacked it. It was farmland that hadn't been managed for several years. So the fishing pond, the hiking trails, and then this is going to take until about December to complete. So then we would have a new budget then at that point in time to work on the other amenities that we've discussed as far as the shelter houses. We've also got some minor picnic areas that we will put in within phase 1. So it's just unfortunately not feasible to do it all in one phase. So that's why we've selected this route.
So Paul Guckenberger again, a question for Ms. Hartman. I want to make sure, because you had made a statement that I want to make sure there's understanding between what we heard from staff and what I thought I might have heard from you as far as the parking goes. I know Des was saying there's no need for a parking waiver, but I'm assuming that means as the rest of the park is built out, that the required parking spaces would be added at that time. So it looks like if I did the calculations right, there's another 200 plus parking spaces that would be added. Is that correct? Is that correct in understanding that, or is that not correct?
Well, we didn't intend to create less parking than the ordinance requires. Your ordinance does have a clause in it that allows for some some of the required vehicle parking to be satisfied by bicycle parking. And so we had situated the parking areas based on the use, the surrounding use, and in some cases kind of maximize the parking in those areas. And so to get another 7 spaces and just add more asphalt, we thought it was a good use of that clause in the ordinance that allows us to use some of those bicycle spaces to satisfy the requirement.
For the entire 141 acres?
No, for this phase.
Okay.
So you are correct there. So the next phase, going to the west, as we expand more acreage, will require more parking.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
Charles here.
Question
For petitioner. Des, if you could just zoom out real fast, just a little bit more. Is the dashed line, is that the proposed sidewalk? And is any of it going to be in place?
I can
Or
answer that.
requesting to have all sidewalks, not until next phase?
The slide that Des is on is actually our road control plan. So that's just a dashed construction limit. If you go to the overall site plan, there's a dash line that shows the trails that go throughout the site.
Right. Are all trails in the future going to be
There you go.
concreted, or is it going to be mulched?
Ryan, do you want to answer that one?
Yes. The main trail would be aggregate. We would use a geotextile fabric with aggregate. As we expand trails, we will have some natural trails. So there will be a mix between aggregate-based and natural trails.
So as this is going in, the only pedestrian walks are going to be the roadways. Is that a correct statement?
That is correct. The entire 140 acres is a Hendrix County asset. So technically folks can enjoy the property as it is now. So there's no limitations to that.
What kind of traffic controls in place, and what's the speed limit? And are those signs going to be posted at regular intervals just for public safety that is using the roadway?
Jessica, can you elaborate on that?
Sure. This first phase, obviously, we've got a lot of intersections and connected roadways, so there'll be your basic, that main drive that runs from Gibbs Road kind of back to the pond. That'll be the main drive, and everything else will have a stop condition intersecting with it. The design speed is technically 30 miles an hour, and that's just for smooth travel. But in terms of traffic control, obviously, when you get to some of these turnaround cul-de-sacs, parking lots, it's a much tighter, slower speed. Ryan, do you want to talk to how you control some of that in a maintenance functioning standpoint if we start to see some issues?
What is the length of that main road?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question.
What is the length of the main road?
Let me look real quick.
And there's no speed humps along that roadway by chance?
That was going to be my recommendation if we experience issues. Number one, we contact law enforcement and welcome them to our properties. Visibility deters. I know they can't be there at all times, so that would be something I would have to pass by my park board. But if we had to, we could put some speed bumps in of some sort to slow folks down. We would have to put those in obviously some unique areas so folks aren't swerving off the road and taking the grass around the speed bumps. I've seen that in other park settings, but I'm confident that we could come to a good solution if necessary.
Will there be a posted speed limit sign when you do enter the park?
That's a question for Jessica, but yes, I do believe those were included.
We do have a sign package. I don't know if we have a posted sign, but that certainly could deter. And I would make it lower than obviously what the design speed was. I'm still looking for your answer, Charles, about the length.
Doesn't
I
look a
believe
lot
our
like a
speed
drag
limit.
strip, but I'm sure a teenager can turn it into one.
Oh, I'm sure too. Yes. So I think our speed limit at McLeod, it's either 10 or 15 miles an hour. I would just follow suit with that. I think that's appropriate. We do have some folks, unfortunately, about once a year, they'll get off roadways late at night, and it's more of vandalism to our grassy areas. But we've responded well to that, working with local law enforcement.
The main roadway is about 2,200 linear feet. Overall, we have almost a mile of driveway within the property.
Main length is not even half a mile, really. Okay, thank you.
This is Paul Guckenberger. Another question I have: if you don't put in sidewalks, is there any ADA issues or requirements that aren't being met? So that basically the only walkable paved surface would be the roadways. If sidewalks or paved sidewalks are not installed. So is that is there any ADA requirements that need to be met?
I think that's more when we install amenities to get folks to amenities. So like our nature playground, shelter houses, we would install sidewalks to those areas. Also, I do believe our aggregate pass at McLeod that our property manager, park manager puts in, I believe those are handicap accessible. So that main trail would be an aggregate covered trail that would be available to all. And I know our parking areas take that into consideration with ADA parking in our entire parking layout.
Other questions? Hearing no other questions for petitioner. At this point, I'm going to open up for public comment at 9:04. So, Mr. Kanin, do we have anybody with any comments?
No, sir, you do not.
Okay. Give them a few seconds.
I'm still seeing none, Mr. Petrides.
Okay, Mr. Cannon, at this point at 9:05, I'm going to close public comment. Any other questions for petitioner or staff from the committee? If there's no other questions, my question is going to be, we still need one waiver, is that correct? Des?
It depends on how you want to do it. It could either be one waiver for the sidewalk and one waiver for the dedicated left, or you can combine the two.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion for a waiver. For one waiver, I would move for DPR 2005 that the waiver for the construction of a dedicated left turn lane be suspended until the second phase of the development of Gibbs Park.
So Paul, before we just minor correction, DPR what? You said 2005.
DPR 2005. Do I have the, is it 2007?
07, I believe.
Little typo here. DPR 2007.
Gibbs Memorial Park. Okay. Is there a second?
Lindy Albers, I second.
Thank you. Discussion on the motion for the waiver? All right, can we have a roll call?
Mr. Petrides?
4.
Mr. Bischoff?
4.
Mr. Duval?
4.
Mr. Guckenberger?
4.
Ms. Albers?
4.
Mr. Niemeyer.
I recuse myself.
Oh, sorry. Waiver is approved.
Okay, I would now entertain a motion for a second waiver for sidewalks.
This is Lindy Albers. I motion that we approve the waiver for 2007 WS Gibbs Memorial Park for the installation of the sidewalks at a later phase.
Is there a second on the motion?
Charles here, I'll second.
Okay. Discussion on the motion. Can we have a vote, please?
Duval. Mr. Duval.
4.
Mr. Guggenberger.
Against.
Ms. Albers.
4.
Mr. Petrini.
4.
Mr. Bischoff.
4.
Is approved.
Thank you. So at this point, a motion on DPR 20-07 WS Gibbs Memorial Park. Anyone?
This is Lindy Albers. I make a motion to approve the petition DPR 2007 WS Gibbs Memorial Park, subject to the following conditions. 1, any revised plans must comply with all the commitments and conditions noted as any part of the approval granted. 2, the petitioner must post a landscape bond prior to the issuance of certificate of occupancy. And 3, the development shall comply with the relevant portions of the town code and comments by Public Works, Fire Department, CRA in the pre-construction meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Sam Duval, second.
Any discussion on the motion? Okay, if we could have a vote, please.
Mr. Guggenberger.
4.
Ms. Albers.
4.
Mr. Petrini.
4.
Mr. Bischoff.
4.
Mr. Duval.
4.
Development plan is approved.
Thank you. So Des, can you tell me if there have been difficulties resolved from the previous DPR?
I was able to get a hold of him. He can hear us, but he can't speak into it. So I could call him and try to put my phone on speaker, and maybe you guys will be able to hear that. I don't know how much backlog there'll be, so we'll try that for now.
Hey Des, this is Bobby. Can you hear me?
Yep. There we go.
Thank you, everyone, on the WS Gibbs support. We greatly appreciate it.
Do I need to start over, or how do we pick this back up?
A brief review, so we're back on the right case. Yes, please.
All right, this is located off of Cobble Spring Drive on the Tier 1 of the U.S. Overlay District. It's for an O'Reilly's Auto Parts. It is 2 front yards, and they did receive 2 variances from the BZA, one for the front landscaping plan and one for the side yard setback in order to have that loading bay up there in the north. Staff is recommending that they have a way that they put a monetary contribution for the sidewalk to the south, and so that we put it in instead of them.
Okay. So at this point, petitioner would like to please present their case. Would be appreciated.
Okay. Well, apologize for the earlier problems. I could hear y'all, but y'all couldn't hear me. So we are building a 7,400 square foot auto parts store. We've got a couple of variances, rear setback, some landscape variances, and Crossroads engineers reviewed our plans. We met with them. Most of the comments were drainage in nature. One of them was the sidewalk, At that time, they asked us to show the sidewalk on our plans for our final submission. And it wasn't until this evening that I found out that we're going to go ahead and pay into a fund and not build the sidewalk ourselves. So we can just take that sidewalk off our plans, and O'Reilly's would be agreeable to paying a $30 per lineal foot for that sidewalk.
Just for clarification, I believe that was simply for the frontage. Is that correct?
That is correct. We will build the sidewalk along Cabo Springs Drive.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else you want to talk about?
Nothing I can think of at this point. We're pretty close to getting approval, I believe, unless something else comes up that we're aware of.
Questions for petitioner? Committee, anybody? Okay, hearing none, I will open this case up for public comment at 9:13. So Mr. Kanin, has anyone signed up to speak or to comment? Mr. Kanin, are you there?
I am. No, you do not have anyone signed up so far.
Okay, I'll give him a little bit. Still no one?
Still no one.
Okay, at 9:14, I'm going to close public comment. Any other questions for petitioner or staff? Hearing none, would anyone care to make a motion? Anyone?
Make a motion in regards to DPRA 2005 O'Reilly Auto Parts. I move that we approve the DPR subject to the following conditions. 1, any revised plans must comply with all commitments and conditions noted as part of any approval granted. 2, the petitioner must post a landscape bond prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. And 3, the development shall comply with all relevant portions of town code and comments by Public Works, Fire Department, CRE at the pre-construction meeting. And finally, 4, the petitioner will provide funds at the rate of $30 per lineal foot for the cost of a sidewalk that fronts US 36 and allow the town to install the sidewalk at a later date.
Mr. Taylor, would we want clarification that the other sidewalk is going to be installed per the plans, or is that necessary?
It's on the plan, so I don't think it's necessary.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second on the motion?
Sam Duval will second.
Any questions on the motion? Okay, in that case, if we could have a vote, please.
Mr. Guggenberger,
4,
Ms. Albers,
4,
Mr. Niemeyer,
4,
Mr. Petridis,
4.
Mr. Bischoff,
4.
Mr. Duval.
4.
Petition is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving forward, other business. Jody, Dez?
I have none. Jody, do you have any?
Nope, I have none.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Before we do that, our next meeting, is that tentatively scheduled at the town hall, or do we have any idea? Des, Jody, anybody?
This is Jody. at this point, we have no idea whether we will be fully open for business. So just please be prepared to Zoom the June or May Plan Commission meeting as well. We'll let you know. You guys are Zoom experts now.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. Motion to adjourn. All those in favor, signify by aye.
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 Opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.